Sup y'all, it's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today I want to give you guys my summary on the recent Legion developer Q&A that happened today, well I guess for you guys yesterday. Now before I really get into that, I do want to say two things. Number one, thank you guys so much for all the support that you gave me on my last video. I really appreciate it. I didn't even expect to get half as much of the response that I did, and it was incredible to me for me to see all the people that reached out to me and told me their stories and how similar those stories were to mine. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Probably not a good thing, but I hope that I've given you, if you're one of those people, I've given you some sort of solidarity to know that you're not alone. So thank you guys so much for sharing that. And number two, back to Warcraft, is that Tom Chilton, who is the game director for World of Warcraft, has stepped down to work on another project in Blizzard, right? He's not leaving the company, he's just working on another project. Ian Hazzikostas, who's one of the lead game designers, has stepped up, or has been promoted, obviously he's been promoted, up to the game director of World of Warcraft. So that's actually really, really incredible. I always thought that Ian Hazzikostas was, a great guy, very, very smart, always came across very well, explained his decision making in a very, very rational and reasoned manner. And so this interview is between Laura, who's one of the community managers, and Ian Hazzikostas, who is the game director. Okay, and by the way, yo, congrats to Ian Hazzikostas. That's fucking badass, right? I'm very, very glad. I think that the game can only get better in his hands, and so I certainly hope that I'm right. So anyway, he talked about a number of different things, but the biggest thing, guys, is that patch 7.1, Return to Karazhan, is coming out on October 25th. Now, I was actually really surprised about that, and honestly, I felt like I wasn't even really ready yet, but to a certain point, I kind of am. It's like, I remember back in, whenever they announced 7.0 for WoD, right, people were talking about, they say it's like, oh, it's coming out in this year, oh, wait, oh, we're not done with HFC, we're not done. It's like, it's been out for a year, like, how are you not done? How are you not have your moose mount yet, right, or whatever, but that's what people were saying, and so I kind of felt that was a little bit dumb for people doing that. But it's funny because now I'm feeling the same way with 7.0. They've had so much content, and for us to see that we're beginning even more, that's really, really awesome. Now, the raid, Karazhan does come out on release on the 25th, and that's going to be a mythic dungeon. You do have to do an attunement for Karazhan. That attunement is account-wide. I think that is one of the best decisions and the best middle ground that they can reach for attunements, and I think that allows them to make these exciting and epic quest lines that you can embark on and work towards on one character, but they don't really feel like a chore whenever you have to do them on all your characters. So I'm really glad that they're creating account-wide attunements. They did that with Ordo, so I thought that was a great idea. And also in 7.0, if you have the Nightfallen reputation to do the Archway or Court of Stars, I think you have to complete one of the dungeons first, but after that those dungeons become available to all of the other characters on your account as well. So all of those decisions are very, very good, and I think that the account-wide attunements are a very good idea. The account-wide reputations I'm not really too sure about, but that's another video. Now, the raid, Trials of Valor, it's a 3-boss raid. It has, I think, Odin, Gwarm, I don't know how to say his name, and Helya as the bosses. It kind of finishes up the whole Stormheim Warrior Class Hall storyline. That raid is not coming out until 2 weeks after the patch comes out, and I think that's also a very, very good idea to allow people to finish up the Emerald Nightmare raid. And they also address the difficulty factor in the Emerald Nightmare raid in terms of the Mythic, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, they are not getting rid of, I don't think they're getting rid of the, cutting edge achievements or the ahead of the curve achievements for Xavius. I don't think that they're getting rid of those, or they're, they're going to be taking those away until Nighthold comes out. So don't worry, but don't quote me on that either. I haven't really seen any sort of an official thing. But anyway, patch comes out on the 25th. Very, very exciting. Very, very glad to see that. It's going to be awesome to, after 10 years to go back to Karazhan and hopefully relive it, and also in a better way than it was. It's going to be very hard to beat, but I think that the way that they're doing Karazhan now in 7.1 is going to be really, really cool. I have not done it. I'm waiting until live comes out so I can actually experience it with my group of people and just do it for the first time. It's going to be really awesome. Now, there were a lot of questions about class balancing, right? And those questions have been very, very, people have been asking those questions for... Okay. They've been asking for 12 years, right? Because the game's been out that long. But they've been really asking them in Legion, right? Because as soon as the artifact weapons were announced, right? So, like, if you have 2 DPS specs, like a warrior, for example, just a random example, and you're playing arms, and then they nerf arms, and they buff fury, which seems like kind of what they're going to do, actually, then it's like you put all your eggs in the arms basket, and it's like you put them in the wrong basket. And so, people are very, very concerned about that because they don't want to feel like they're wasting their time, and they don't want to lose their raid spot based on kind of a change, a hot fix or something like that. Now, I don't really know if that's going to happen, but Blizzard is doing their best to make sure that the class balancing changes are more incremental and not as drastic as they are usually at the beginning of an expansion or something like that. Now, ENS Ghostus brought up a really, really good point that I wanted to share with you guys, which is that whenever you look at like Warcraft logs to see what the best parsing class for like whatever fight is, you're going to see the best players playing the best class. And so because the best players and the very, very serious min-maxing players are going to play the class with the highest ceiling, that kind of exacerbates the difference between the best spec and the maybe not so good spec or the worst spec. So whereas the difference would be maybe like 10% normally, because the best players are playing it, it's increased to about 15%. So the difference is more than what it really is numerically because of the types of people that play that spec. I think that was a very, very insightful idea and insight. Really, it's very good insight. And I do definitely think that it's true. I remember back in Mists of Pandaria, at the beginning of Mists of Pandaria, I played arms like an idiot, and I actually did pretty well. I didn't like really do that shitty. I did like maybe 90k DPS or something like that, which is pretty decent then. And so I parsed very highly, and I was even competitive with Fury Warriors, even though most people said that ARMS sucked. So I do think that is true, and I have personal experience to kind of, prove that in a way. Not really prove it, but, to attest. So they did talk about a number of different specs and classes. Shadow Priests are probably going to be built less around, because Surrender to Madness is so good, they're probably going to build Shadow Priests less around Surrender to Madness because it's been such a defining element of that spec, and I think that's probably a good thing. Some people might not like that play style so much, and personally, I think I probably wouldn't, but I've never really played a Shadow Priest, and I think that's a good idea, but I don't really know, as long as Shadow Priests don't end up being terrible. Also, they talked a little bit about Fury Warriors, which, by the way, like, it's about time. Like, they've sucked. Like, people have been saying that ever since beta came out, ever since alpha came out, they sucked. And he said better late than never, that's better late than never. That's right. But I just wish it was before. So they're buffing Fury Warriors to realize they fucked up. The damage reduction is going to go, or damage increase from like being enraged is going to go from 30% to 20%. I don't know what Warpaint is going to be. Is that going to take it down to 10? I have no idea. The unpredictable nature of taking more damage is not really very fun to players. Surprise. So they are going to be nerfing that. I don't really know what they're going to be doing with Fury Warrior damage, though. I didn't really hear them specifically address that. Now, there were tons of questions about Legendaries, right? And, I have you guys know how I feel about it. And I didn't know, because there wasn't really a official statement, and a lot of people were wondering, and especially I was wondering before I got one, is there any sort of bad luck protection for Legendaries in the game right now? There is bad luck protection in the game for Legendaries right now, but that bad luck protection is not time-based, right? So it's not like if you play for like 3 days and you don't do anything, you're just doing pet battles all day, you do an emissary quest and you're going to get Legendary, right? It's nothing like that. What I think that it is every single time that you loot a boss or you loot a chest or you do anything that had a potential reward of a Legendary and you don't receive it, there's a weighted chance on whichever type of content it is to increase your chance of getting Legendary in the next one until it builds up to a point where you actually do get it. That's what I'm assuming the bad luck protection is, but I don't really know, and we never will, because if they do ever release that information, people are just going to beat their head against the wall doing the exact same content over and over, which has been determined as being the most efficient. It kind of sucks to not know, but they're making the right call. Now, also, I think they talked a little bit more about like kind of buffing certain Legendaries. Like if you get the ring, you get the neck. It's like if you win the lottery, but they pay you in dog shit. You know what I mean? Like it's like you get something good, but then it's not good, right? It's like it's orange, but it's actually, well, I guess, a dog shit, but it's brown. So it kind of sucks, and they are going to be buffing some of those legendaries. They did make the mention, though, that some of these legendaries might not really give you a DPS increase, but they do give you a survivability increase, which could be very useful in Mythic Plus dungeons and not really as much in raids. So I think that is also a very good insight, and again, it's just really, really great to see them doing these Q&As, and I do really, really appreciate them doing that, just so we can actually see and hear, like, okay, this is the logic, this is the reasoning. So also, if players have concerns, they can base those concerns off of the logic, and they have something that's more tangible to go with, right? So I'm very, very glad that they're doing that, and they're buffing those legendaries, so people don't feel like they got a bad legendary. That should never really be something that happens in my mind. Now, Mythic Emerald Nightmare was cleared in less than 24 hours. That was not really intended. They didn't really intend Mythic Xavius to be that easy. They intended it to be maybe a couple-day boss for the very, very high-end guilds. Now, they didn't intend Mythic Xavius to be like fucking Mythic Archimond, right? They didn't intend him to be just like a wall and it's going to take 500, 300 wipes or something like that. They didn't intend it to be that hard, but they intended it to be harder than what it was. And they were a little bit disappointed with how fast that it was cleared, but it is the first raid in the expansion, so they didn't really make it to be some kind of like impenetrable wall. Now, also, they wanted to de-incentivize doing split runs. So if you guys don't know what split runs are, many very high-end guilds, mythic guilds, do split runs. So that means that, like, back in the day, you had like the different tokens, like you had Protector token, which had like Warrior, Shaman, and like Hunters on it, right? So if you had a Protector token drop, it could go in one of those three classes. And so you do a full run, and you'd only bring one warrior. You wouldn't bring any Shamans and any Hunters. So any Protector token it drops would be funneled into that one warrior. And so whenever the next week came out and Mythic progression started, that one warrior would be so much more powerful than he would be, if he didn't have that, if he had to share those Protector tokens with other players. So they do want to de-incentivize the split runs, and I do think that's a very, very good idea, personally. It does kind of annoy me in a way that they're looking so much in de-incentivizing these emergent gameplay behaviors, such as the split runs, and such as they're looking at solutions, at trying to figure out a way to where if somebody DCs or leaves your group in a Mythic Plus dungeon, that doesn't just completely derail your group and you lose your keystone, right? But they also don't want to have people like use the keystone, and then the guy that uses the keystone gets kicked out of the group, and then the group leader invites their friend and they steal the guy's keystone, right? So they are looking and trying to figure out ways to combat this emergent gameplay behavior, but they're not at the same time looking at the emergent gameplay that's coming out of Legendaries, where top-end guilds are requiring them, and even very high-end pugs are requiring them, which I think is, in a way, not really worse, but it's just as bad in a lot of ways, because it's going to affect increasingly more people as more people keep playing. So I do think that's something that they do need to look into and find some sort of a solution to. It doesn't seem like they're going to be doing anything in regards to how legendaries are dropping right now, as a disappointment to me, but it's also not a surprise. So that's pretty much how it goes, right? I don't really know what else to say about the legendaries. I've talked about them many, many times. As somebody who has the best in slot legendary for my class and my spec, I still think it's a very, very bad decision, and it's a very, very bad system. So hopefully they'll be able to give players some sort of way of feeling like they have some sort of control over their own destiny. But I don't want to get into that too much, because I have many, many times. Now, also, they talked a lot about basically like different items that drop. People are kind of concerned, right? Because they get like a piece of gear. Like, here's an example. Like for Warrior, right? If you get a cloak that has crit on it, let's say it just has crit, like just an example, secondary stats a disparity, basically, because your best secondary stat and your worst secondary stat is very, very big. Now, it's more than it ever really has been. So if you get a cloak that has crit on it, and let's say that cloak is 895, and you have another cloak that is 860 that has mastery on it, the 860 cloak that has mastery is probably still going to be better than the 895. And getting an 895 cloak that you can't even really use, that doesn't really make somebody feel good. So I can completely understand why they're trying to, negate that and work around that. And so hopefully they'll be able to lessen that gap, and as the expansion progresses, they're going to that is going to probably fix itself to an extent. Now, the reason that this has happened is because previously in expansions, you would get very, very minimal secondary stats whenever you'd start out the expansion, and towards the end of the expansion, you'd have something like 50% crit, you'd be at haste cap, and you'd have like 150% mastery, right? But they tried to even out that gap to where whenever you first started playing the game, you could still have, at least to an extent, that in-game feel of your class. But there still will be obviously an increase, but that increase will not be as exponential as it has been in, let's say, Mists of Pandaria. First tier, you had DPS, max DPS 120k, second tier, max DPS was 150k, third tier, it was 600k, right? On like very, very high end, like the absolute highest parses, right? So that type of exponential and very, very high increase is something that obviously they don't want to have happen, so that decreases the chance that they have to do another number switch, which will, by the way, happen after Legion. So I think that as the expansion progresses along, the secondary stats won't be really quite as important because of the primary stats on the main gear. But we're gonna have to see what happens, and I do hope that they. I don't know why they can't just add reforging back. Like, I think that would be the perfect solution, honestly. And I just really wish they would do that. It really kind of sucks to get a piece of gear that has the wrong secondary stats and you can't reforge them off. I always felt like reforging was a way that you could still at least get something out of, a piece of gear that wasn't perfect. And so I really hope that they can add that back in, but we're going to have to see what happens. Now, also, oh, by the way, they also said that basically item level is supposed to determine how good a piece of gear is, right? So if it has a higher item level, it's basically going to be better. Despite some exceptions, right, of course. But I don't really know how to feel about that. In a way, like, just using the highest level pieces is the best idea. That kind of takes away some of the thinking that you'd have to use and, the theory crafting that goes into your class. But I think that on more of a micro level, that's still going to occur. But we're just going to have to see what happens. Now, there have been a lot of questions because flasks are 1,000 gold that it's like, what's this? Like, how is it going to be cheaper, right? People are used to, like, buying a flask on, in Draenor, right? The garrison gives them, 5,000 welfare gold a week, and they're just spending it all on flasks or pre-potting whenever they're doing world quests, or not back then, 10 and jungle quests. And, like now, it's like potions are like 500 gold or 200 gold, and like flasks are 1,000 gold. It's just ridiculous, right? And I don't really have too big of a problem with that, but I also have like 5 or something million gold, right? So I'm kind of in a privileged position. Anyway, so I need to check my my gold privilege. So they are going to be, 7.1 is going to bring in a Blood of Sargeras vendor, very similar to the Mode of Harmony vendor that was in Mists of Pandaria, and that's going to hopefully combat some of the costs and add more of those gathering materials into the economy, which will hopefully decrease the cost of the profession materials, or the profession materials and what's made out of them, the flasks and the potions. So we're going to have to see what happens there. They do not intend on making the costs as low as they were in Draenor, but right now the costs are as high as they were probably back in Burning Crusade. The only time that the costs were really higher would be, in my opinion, in vanilla, whenever the flasks were like just a ridiculous amount of money, right? So I do really hope that they do that. That would be amazing if they did, but either way, I'm going to be using them. So I think that's more something that's going to be focused around allowing the less casual players to still get something out of what they're doing and still be able to afford things without feeling like they're going to go broke for being as optimal as possible in raids. So also, the action cam comes back in patch 7.1, although every single time you log in, it is disabled. That's kind of a pain in the ass, but I'm sure there's a macro that's going to do that, and I'm sure there are many add-ons that are going to just automatically enable it as well. I never really gave a shit about the action cam personally. It's going to be cool to do for videos and stuff, but I don't really feel like it's a functional, useful ability, or a useful, like UI or interface edition or whatever. So personally, I don't really care, but doing it for videos might be something I'd be interested in doing, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a different perspective and make things a little bit newer, right? Now, also, they do not really have any plans, because people have been asking this along with the class changes, is they've been asking, like, let's say like one of my specs gets nerfed, like how am I going to move all my artifact power over to the other spec? You can't. You're not going to be able to. They said that in beta, they said that in alpha, and they're still saying that now. You're not going to be able to do that. Artifact knowledge is supposed to bridge that gap to an extent. I don't really know how to feel about that. I'm not really going to come out with an opinion, to be honest, because it's like it could go either way, honestly. I can see the reasons for, I can see the reasons against. Now, also, they're not going to have or add any sort of a cap on artifact power per week or anything like that, like Valor points or whatever. Or I don't think Valor points had it, but they did back in Mists of Pandaria, and so Justice points and everything, I believe. I don't remember. But the point is that they're not going to add a cap, and the reason for that is because once players reach that cap, they stop playing. And I think that you can see so many different systems in Legion that are trying to incentivize continuous player play. That was a very, very bad thing to say. Player engagement. Very, very many things. You see that, the consistent artifact power, deterministic rewards, legendaries, titan forging, everything like that. I just really wish that they would do things in a less Skinner box gambling mindset way, but we're going to have to see what happens. Anyway, that was one big thing. I was kind of glad to see that. I don't really like having weekly caps on things, although it does make things a little bit simpler in terms of what you want to focus on. Now, bonus rolls is like bonus rolls, like right now, like bonus rolls are kind of weird, right? Because you can bonus roll an 895 socketed chess piece Mythic Titan Forged, or you can get 6 gold. So, it's like a slap in the face. It's like you get 6 gold. Oh, and that's not 6. Never mind. It's 16. 16 gold for using your bonus roll coin that could have been a Mythic Titan Forge piece of gear. It's like that disparity is really, really bad, and it makes people feel really shitty whenever they don't get what they want. Personally, I've never really been a huge fan of bonus rolls, but I can see why they're adding them in. I don't want to get into that, honestly. I really don't want to get into it. But the point is that they're going to be adding some sort of solution to make those consolation prizes instead of 16 gold. Maybe make it a little bit of artifact power, and also give you another reason to get those bonus roll coins and use them so you can actually get the artifact power out of them. But we're going to have to see. Now, also, they did have a lot of discussion about Mythic Plus. Now, Mythic Plus, the scaling in Mythic Plus is, brought a lot of concerns in terms of what classes are good and what classes are bad. It's like an example, like Fury Warriors are actually pretty good in Mythic Plus, especially if you have Teaming and Fortified. But if you have if you have like not really bolstering, but if you have like tyrannical bosses, arms is better, right? So Fury though is actually pretty good in Mythic Plus. It's not really that good in rating though. So Blizzard wants to have some sort of, they've always had like the mantra, or they've added this in probably Wrath of the Lich King, bring the player, not the class, right? So it's like you don't want to feel like you have to bring a shaman because they bring heroism. So they gave mages Time Warp, and they gave you drums of war or whatever they are, right? They give you heroism. So I understand that they're doing that. I think that, what they're trying to do is reach a middle ground where you still feel like if you bring a Warlock or you bring a Fury Warrior, if you bring somebody else, you're still getting a unique advantage in that Mythic Plus dungeon, but that unique advantage isn't necessarily required. I think that it always really will be at the very, very highest echelons, but everywhere down the line, I think that it can give players a rewarding feel for playing a certain class and feeling like, okay, I can do this one really, really cool thing that helps my group. And so I'm really, really glad that they're trying to do that. And you guys saw that even going in towards Draenor, and especially in Legion, that they're trying to give people that class feel, right? So each class is a specific advantage that they can have and specific things that they can bring to the table. And so I think that's a very, very good idea. There's also questions about the Mythic Plus gear. Now, right now, if you clear a Mythic Plus 10 dungeon or higher, the baseline gear that you get out of that Mythic Plus dungeon, out of the chest inside the dungeon, is 865. The chest that you get at the end of the week or the beginning of the next week out of the dungeon is capped at 880. It doesn't get any higher. And so if you clear like a Mythic Plus 12, it's still 880. If you clear a Mythic Plus 10, it's 880. That cap is not going to be increased whenever the Trials of Valor comes out. Probably, they said it will be increased whenever Nighthold comes out, and probably it'll be increased to like 8, probably like Mythic Plus 15, so it'll scale all the way up to like 880 gear, and the chest gear will probably be like 900, right? Because Mythic Nighthold gear is 900 or 905, so that would kind of make sense. Either way, guys, that is pretty much everything that they talked about. I'm very, very thankful and very, very glad that they've been doing these Legion developer Q&As. And honestly, guys, you really think about it, it's like you just do the math. It's like, besides the selfie camera and the, what was the other thing? Pepe, right. Pepe, besides the selfie camera and Pepe, there has been, and Twitter integration, there has been more content in Legion than there was in all of WoD, and Legion's first patch hasn't even really come out yet. So if they just get Nighthold out, right at that point, it's going to be at least as much, but arguably more content than Warlords of Draenor had for the entirety of the expansion. So I'm really glad that they're putting a lot of content and they're putting a lot of effort into Legion, and I just really hope that they can keep it up. Okay, it's really I'm enjoying the expansion a lot. Everybody that I know is enjoying the expansion a lot. Obviously, I want to hear from you guys if you are. I know some people aren't. There are certain elements of the expansion that I really hate. I hate the legendary items, and I also hate the Titan forging system. Though I don't like random stuff. I'm not a gambler, right? So I don't like that at all, and I feel like they could add more deterministic rewards, and I would feel more compensated, and I would feel more compelled to play. But personally, that's just my opinion. But other than that, I really liked what they've done with Legion, and I really hope they continue it. They're doing a great job, and Ian Hazzikostas, I really hope that as game director now, he's going to be able to take that to the next level. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think. If I forgot anything, definitely go ahead and comment that below. But other than that, thank you guys very much for watching, and that's pretty much it. So, oh right, it's like I have like, I'll tell you guys something. I have like a robot like in my head. I say thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, right? So if I don't say that, it messes me up. That's what just happened. So thank you for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe.